this tutorial, we will be discussing indicators. An indicator is a compound that changes color based upon the pH. So notice at the very beginning of the titration, the pH is acidic. And then as we add more and more of the base, eventually it becomes basic. In the process, the indicator, the solution was clear. Then once it reaches approximately 8, a pH of 8, then it starts to change colors. Once you've moved past that point, it turns to a deeper color, and then it's going to stay that color. So let's talk about indicators and ways to monitor titrations. Many dyes change color depending on the pH of the solution. These dyes are weak acids establishing an equilibrium with the water and the hydronium in the solution. So for here, the indicator is a weak acid. It reacts with the water to produce the hydronium ion and the conjugate base of the indicator. The color of the solution depends on the relative concentrations of the conjugate base of the indicator and the weak acid of the indicator. If they're approximately the same, the color will be mixed with the colors of both of them individually. If there's more of the indicator conjugate acid, if there's more of the conjugate base of the indicator on the right hand side, the color is going to reflect that of the conjugate base. If there's more of the weak acid indicator on the left hand side, the color will reflect that color of the indicator as a weak acid. So here's a chart of a whole bunch of different kind of indicators. Notice that each one of them has their own pH in which they change colors. Also notice right here is phenolphthalein, which is probably the one that you're most familiar with. It changes at approximately a little bit past 8. The general method for monitoring pH during the course of a titration, so if we're trying to get every single little drop being added, is to measure it with conductivity. The conductivity of the solution due to H3O+, the hydronium ion. Using a pH meter and electrode that specifically measures the H3O+. So you'll have a probe that you put into the beaker or the flask, and it'll measure the H3O concentration through the whole thing, and I'll have a readout digitally. The endpoint of the titration is reached at or near the equivalence point in the titration at the inflection point of the titration curve. If a titration is being monitored by an indicator, which is what we just discussed, then the endpoint of the titration is signaled with a color change, such as this, which is phenolphthalein. Notice that once it hit 9, it changed colors, and then it became darker at 10. Once it reaches that darker color, it's not going to get any darker. It is the color that's going to remain. The difference between the indicator and the conductivity is the conductivity will read it the entire time, and you know how it changes throughout the process. Whereas the indicator, you don't know the change has occurred or is going to occur until it actually happens. For most titrations, the titration curve shows a very large change in pH for very small additions of base near the equivalence point. An indicator can therefore be used to determine the endpoint of the titration if it changes color within the same range as the rapid change in pH. Let's take a look at that chart again. Here's the indicator chart. Notice it's very, very mild change in pH at the beginning, and then it leaps up, and then it levels off again. That's what this is referring to. An indicator can therefore be used to determine the endpoint of the titration if the change occurs, the changes color with the same range as that rapid change in pH. So, and then it goes way up. This part shouldn't be here. It starts down here. So, the titration curve shows a very large change for pH and very small additions at the equivalence point. The pKa at this point is of the weak acid of the indicator is approximately the pH at that equivalence point. And that's how you use indicators and how to monitor the pH during a titration.